The movie's main character is Dusty, an overweight, old-fashioned, and careless guy. He just thinks about eating and watching old movies. The world has changed as a result of technological breakthroughs, but Dusty is still trapped in the 1980s. He dislikes using cell phones, considers texting to be a waste of time, and even finds emojis odd. He just has one fear, which is millennials. Teenagers who have different views than his are intolerable to him. At the beginning of the film, Dusty is driving about eating a hamburger and listening to 80s music. He is carefree and doesn't have a full-time work despite being 50 years old. Dusty has lost all of his buddies as a result of this habit, but he couldn't give a damn. Soon after, a group of millennials catch him in the act and record him on camera. Dusty is visibly uncomfortable, but he is unable to communicate with them because of how awkward he is. After a time, his niece Chloe gets in his vehicle with him, and the two go to the cinema. It turns out that they've been viewing movies together since Chloe was a little girl, and they still do so now. Despite their apparent closeness, it's obvious that Chloe finds her uncle a little odd given their disparate ages and lifestyles. This is made much clearer when Dusty plays an old tune that she refers to as boring. When the uncle and niece arrive at a cinema named Cinethrax, they begin arguing which film to see. Dusty wants to see a classic 1980s film that he has previously watched 10 times, while Chloe wants to see Chosen, a Cinethrax exclusive 3D film. The obstinate niece succeeds in her goals ultimately. After that, they go to the ticket queue, where many millennials are texting and snapping selfies. Uncle Dusty is, as predicted, repulsed by the scene. And to make things worse, he doesn't even have the money to pay for the pricey movie tickets. As a result, Chloe unwillingly pays some money. Strangely, everyone working for Cinethrax, including the ticket salesman and the bouncers, has a strange, gloomy expression on their face. Uncle Dusty throws his 3D glasses into the trash before entering the main cinema and gets out his own hefty spectacles, which he nicknames shifters. He has apparently imported these shifters in order to flatline them into typical 2D movies, since he despises 3D movies so intensely. He also brought a pair for his niece Chloe, but as was to be anticipated, she isn't interested in wearing them. Following that, Dusty goes to the canteen to get some popcorn. There, a group of young people surround him and ask whether he unintentionally entered the 3D area. Simply stating that he is a movie geek, Dusty then departs. He walks inside the main theater and sees Zach, the handsome manager of Cinethrax, flirting with Chloe. Dusty comes up to them, but Zach makes an explanation and walks away. However, two of Chloe's pals show in at the same moment and sit down next to her. It turns out that she had always intended to do this. The movie date with her uncle was only a pretext to leave the home. Dusty is displeased that Chloe is not spending time with him and that his chair has been usurped by her pals. Chloe refuses to sit with him despite his best efforts to persuade her. She has begun to think of her uncle as a dull guy who loves to make her seem foolish in front of her friends. Dusty is upset after hearing this, yet he still chooses to take a seat directly behind Chloe's. Zach enters the stage shortly after and makes a startling announcement. He sets out the ground rules, telling everyone to put on their Cinethrax 3D spectacles and to refrain from using their phones. The news has the millennials fired up, and they begin cheering in delight. The movie Chosen then finally starts. The 3D action is so lifelike that despite the love story's odd acting and plot lines, millennials are really adoring the film. They shout and applaud with every single conversation. Uncle Dusty, who doesn't have glasses, is unimpressed with the film, however. He is really eager to go home. He chooses to don his shifting spectacles shortly after remembering them. Dusty is still unimpressed, however, since they flatlined the 3D into an uninteresting 2D version. He then makes the decision to irritate the nearby residents. He informs a friend of Chloe who is texting at the theater that using a phone is not permitted. He really makes a little commotion, which annoys the other millennials present. Finally, Chloe convinces her buddy to put down the phone so they can enjoy the movie in peace when Dusty still won't give in. Dusty is fully oblivious that he is humiliating his niece in front of her sophisticated pals, but he thinks he has won. Dusty becomes more bored as the film progresses. He catches a pretty strange thing in one moment, as if the screen were broken. He removes his shifting glasses, but there is nothing there. Dusty, who is perplexed, wants to put on the Cinephrac's glasses to enjoy a genuine movie. He begs Chloe to temporarily give her spectacles, but at this point, she is tired of her uncle's silly pranks. She admonishes him brutally for making her seem bad in front of her friends and demands that he behave properly. Uncle Dusty had no choice but to put his shifting glasses back on and continue viewing the film. He detects a massive, worm-like thing suddenly staring through the screen. The existence of this worm is utterly unknown to the theater's millennial audience, but Dusty is able to make it out. He instantly removes his glass, out of fear as the worm vanishes as a result. The worm is gone to be seen after a few minutes. Dusty surmises that his 2D spectacles may have had a role in the incident. So he puts it back on, and the moment he does, the enormous worm sucker attacks him. In the auditorium, Dusty yells in terror and raises a commotion. Additionally, he threw his popcorn all over Chloe and her pals. The millennials get enraged and begin to call him names, but Dusty is certain that something strange is happening inside the cinema. Chloe refuses to listen when he attempts to explain it to her, as was to be anticipated. Instead, she feels humiliated and apologizes for bringing him here. The Cinephrac's manager, Zach, is quickly drawn to the ruckus and approaches Dusty to take him away, to the pleasure of the other millennials. Chloe also follows him out of concern that her uncle has gotten himself into trouble. Zach comes to the conclusion that the elderly guy is just confusing the very realistic 3D action for the actual thing, as Dusty attempts to explain that something came out of the screen and approached him outside. Dusty, however, is certain that he saw a creature resembling a worm. Finally, he makes the decision to seek a refund and leave the location, but to his amazement, Chloe refuses to go. Instead, she reprimands her uncle for repeatedly making her feel uncomfortable, simply to be the focus of attention, he says. After telling him this, she walks away from him and enters the theater again. Zach stops Dusty as he attempts to follow her by stating that he is no longer permitted to enter. Uncle Dusty, who is distraught for no apparent reason, chooses to wait for Chloe until the movie is over. Zach, however, leads him to the projection room since he can't wait in the main hall. There, Zach and his staff begin discussing how Cinephrac's very realistic filming and graphics would lead it to rule the globe. Movies in 2D are a thing of the past. 3D is currently in vogue. Additionally, they encourage Dusty to give it a go and provide a money-back guarantee if he still doesn't like it. Then Zach offers Dusty a set of Cinephrac's spectacles, but after giving it some thinking, Dusty declines them. As a result, the Cinephrac's personnel grow furious and abruptly transform into zombie-like creatures. They then assault Dusty, almost causing him to collide with a sharp item. But the uncle manages to escape their grasp. What was his secret? He just stuffed a nasty hamburger into the possessed zombies after pulling it out of his pocket. After that, Dusty goes to the entrance hall and looks for a way out. It is, however, impossible since all of the Cinephrac's staff members have turned into zombies and are searching for him. Dusty enters the storage room undercover and gets ready to perform the one thing he despises the most: texting. He apologizes for being a jerk and reveals that he is afraid of losing Chloe in a series of texts to her. Then he starts to tell her about the threat, but Zach and the others open the door and whisk him away before he can finish. Chloe has already begun to regret reprimanding her uncle earlier. She waits for his subsequent communication, but it never arrives. As a result, she picks up and puts on his shifter glasses when she discovers them laying on the ground. She suddenly sees a massive tentacle thing that has completely occupied the screen. Chloe is the only uninfected person remaining in the cinema, since the monster is also draining the life out of all the other millennials. She removes her spectacles in terror and attempts to flee, but every infected millennial starts after her. There is a huge battle, and it seems like there is no hope left. Fortunately, Chloe is able to fend off the hundreds of infected millennials before entering the projection room with the aid of a pretend sword. She ultimately understands that he was speaking the truth when she arrives at the location and sees her uncle shackled and chained to a chair. Before she could assist him, Zach and the others showed there and detained her. Zach then unveils the primary beast responsible for all of this mayhem. It turns out to be an extraterrestrial species expansionist who has traveled from another galaxy. Zach claims that being infected was the greatest thing that has ever happened to him, since he is no longer in pain or anxious. The extraterrestrial just wants to assist the uncle-niece team get over their dismal and dull existence. Therefore, he also exhorts them to embrace the change. After saying this, he forces Dusty to see the movie while wearing a set of Cinefrax 3D glasses. He'll reportedly become one of them as a result of this. Fortunately, Chloe steps in just in time and stabs the alien with a shard of shattered glass. As a result, the infected zombies are briefly stunned, enabling Chloe to free her uncle from his bonds. Sadly, just as they are ready to go, Zach lets out a tentacle from his mouth, grabbing Chloe and beginning to control her. She quickly begins to spin, indicating that the alien has already entered her body. Uncle Dusty suddenly reaches for an axe and slices off Zach's head like a 1980s action hero. But by then, the harm has already been done. The two soon arrive to the escape door, and as Dusty opens it, he discovers that a gigantic extraterrestrial has destroyed the city beyond. He eventually understands at this point that aliens have taken over the planet. Chloe also alters her attitude at the same time. She advises her uncle to accept change and the realization that there is no turning back. She continues by saying that Zach was correct. There is no suffering or worry in this existence. Soon, the other millennials and staff members of Cinefrax show there and begin convincing him to embrace the change. To sway Dusty's decision, they even perform a song. Dusty ultimately gave up and began singing along to the song after realizing there was no hope. In the last scene, everyone enters the cinema to see the same film once again. Chloe offers her uncle a set of Cinefrax spectacles so that he may accept the transformation and turn into one of them. Chloe is now fully possessed. As Dusty nervously awaits the alien's arrival and possession, the film comes to a close.